Okay, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. This is another of our bi-weekly meetings for SIG CLI. Today is October 10th, and our agenda is packed with the items. So let's get this thing going. So before we dive into the agenda items, a couple announcements. So following up the discussions that we had 2 weeks ago during planning, we created 2 projects in the kubectl repo. Both of them are linked in the agenda. That was also linked to the chat. And you can also see that on the screen. One is tracking the items that we are working on for the current release. It will be a living document, and to have one source of truth, we will always be updating this document. So currently, this reflects the main items that we are working for 1.13. The second project that was also created is tracking the major bugs that we have for kubectl. I hope that doesn't require further explanation. If you have any doubts, suggestions, propositions, how to change, modify, update those, feel free to reach out to me or Sean directly, or you can reply to the announced emails that we send out to the SIG CLI mailing list. The third announcement is that over the weekend, I managed to restructure the kubectl command subdirectories. So currently, every single command or group of commands, if we're talking about first level of kubectl commands, is living in its own directory. This should simplify development for people that are improving or working on just single command, in that they will be able to limit the scope of their tests only to that particular piece of code instead of running all of the tests for the entire kubectl. There will be further changes happening in the upcoming weeks. We want to ensure that the kubectl command subdirectory contains only the commands and nothing else. So there are still some reshuffling required to get to the clean goal, but overall, I'm hoping, and so is Sean and Phil and Juan and pretty much everyone who are helping, who's helping with the effort, that at the end of the day, we should have a clean and readable structure to work with the kubectl commands. The next item on the agenda is the test grid. I was taking care of our test queue for the past 2 weeks, and thankfully the test grid was very peaceful. There was no major events happening with the SIG CLI related test suite. So I must admit that was very peaceful 2 weeks. When it comes to updating the test document, I haven't got to that one yet, because due to the restructuring, I need to work a little bit more on the shape of the current document, because what we had before will be slightly different from what we have these days. Okay, so on to the topics, and the first topic is, I'm guessing, I don't see Ayush around, but Kendrick's around, so I'm gonna give you the voice, and the floor is yours, Kendrick.
Thank you so much. So everyone, my name is Kendrick Coleman. I am the 1.13 enhancements lead. Aish couldn't be here today, so I'm stepping in for her. So we're just coming around to all the SIGs to do a few things. One, introduce ourselves. B, to just give you an idea of what our expectations are for 1.13. It's been said a few times within inside of the weekly release, as well as within inside of the community. But 1.13 is really targeted to be more of a quote unquote stable release. So we are looking to make sure that we're not bringing in a lot of breaking alpha features or anything like that that could potentially set this behind. This is because there's 2 KubeCons plus the US holidays that are all coming. And not only that is Code Slush actually begins on November, I think, 11th or 15th. So we're already in the 1-month countdown for essentially getting to that point. So the idea is that I put the link in there so you can see which features are assigned to SIG CLI. There's actually quite a few that are targeted for the 113 roadmap. So if you are an owner of that particular enhancement, you've probably got a ping from me earlier this week, just kind of looking to see to make sure that you feel confident that this can still hit the targeted milestone dates that are going to be assigned to it as well. So if by some chance you don't think it can, go ahead, comment on the enhancement on that issue, and we will take it off the milestone, take it off the sheet for tracking, so on and so forth. If there's anything, I would also send out a message to anything that had not been tracked in the milestone to see if it was going to be there. So if you are a owner and it's not going anywhere, you can let me know that it's not going anywhere, and we can just give you a thumbs up. But really, 113 is really geared towards a lot of things that could be that either slip from 112 because of documentation or end-to-end testing, anything like that. So we're trying to, again, just make this a little bit more stable. I'll open up the floor to any questions that anyone might have as well. With that, then I will turn it back over to you and let you continue on with your agenda.
Okay, thank you very much for the update, for the information. Like Kendrick said, if you have any questions, doubts, feel free to reach out either to myself or Sean, or to Kendrick himself, or Aisha, with regards to the items that are planned for 113 release. From the quick glimpse that I had on the list, there are a few items that we as a SIG were not tracking before, and I'll try to have a look at it at the list, especially for the items that are marked for 113 and where the SIG CLI was being called out in the labels, to ensure that we have them on our tracking board as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sean, is Antoine with you? I don't see him
Hi.
on.
I'm not ready yet.
The participant list.
Give me 5 minutes.
Okay. In that case, Nikolai, can you go with your topic, which is retrieving and printing logs from multiple sources?
Hello. Yes, my name is Nikolai. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. This is the improvement for kubectl logs, which allows users to get logs from multiple sources. For example, you can select multiple pods by label, which is basically the main reason for this. I will try to give you like an impression, overview of my changes. So basically, I try to make my changes to be like as much similar to the existing code base, to existing experience. For example, currently kubectl logs allow you to receive logs from multiple sources without following them, and it fails on the first error. For example, when it just reads first log, it will stop reading the second one. It will not read the second log if there was an error in during the reading of the first log source. So I try to keep the user experience as close as possible to the existing behavior. But at the same time, I did add the ability to follow logs from multiple sources in a concurrent way. So there are some open questions, like should we have a limit for concurrent requests, which is a really good question. Initially, I decided not to introduce any like synthetic limits for these because we know very little about the user's environment, at least from what I see. And I felt like I'm not sure that what the reasonable limit should be. But I agree with you all about the need of limit. I'm happy to introduce a flag for a command with a default value and allow users to set a higher limit if they feel confident. So I'm happy to go and make those changes if you're all happy with the approach. Hopefully it makes sense. I'm sorry. Let me know if you have any questions.
That makes sense. I would definitely go with some configurable limit. I don't have any number in my head currently, but definitely something reasonably small, 5, 6, or something like that, just to ensure that we are not DDoSing the server by accident. If you specify a label that will select by accident more pods than you initially thought that you are. So we could put a warning that the selector that you provided is returning, I don't know, 20 pods, but the current limit is set to 5, for example, and put a warning at the top of log output, and then just continue with it, with information how you can update it. This way, we would ensure that the server will not be DDoS by accident. And at the same time, we will tell the user explicitly how to fix the problem. Because maybe the fact that he is selecting 20 pods is intentional, in which case he should also intentionally say, yes, that's the limit that I'm aware of, and this and set it explicitly on the kubectl call. So that I think is very important to have that setting be there. And honestly, if we come up with some number, there's nothing stopping us from changing the default if we decide that it is too high or too low.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a good approach, and it's always. I think we should start with a low number like 5 or 10, because it will be easier to increase the limit than otherwise.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think I'm happy with this approach, and I'm happy to make those changes.
Yeah, definitely increasing the number, the defaults will be easier because it won't be a backwards incompatible change, but we will be improving the user experience. So 3 or 5 is something that I would start with, and then we can always increase the number as we see that a lot of people is complaining about that number being too low. Then we can double it or something like that. But for starters, I would go with low number, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be probably the highest number I would go with.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
What others are feeling about it? Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So first of all, I think this is really, really nice. Did we ever answer the question about how to interleave and whether there would be a prefix to the logging? and so that we can understand how the, at least to have some visibility on what the interleaved log messages look like?
So I don't. Oh, go ahead.
Go on.
I was going to say, so we didn't explicitly state this on the PR that I'm aware of, but I do agree that at least prefixing each log entry with its source makes sense. Like I would be more in favor of doing this than have ordering, for example, of each stream. So yeah, I'd be in favor of prefixing each entry with its source.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, I will explain the interleave. There was a question about interleaving from different sources plus interleaving lines. I did some changes to prevent logs to be interleaved in the middle of the line, but I didn't add any prefixing of there is currently no way to say that this logs comes from this pod, for example. I agree it will be useful, but I think it will probably require an extra flag for it, because currently we do not print log source in kubectl logs, as far as I remember. So I would probably do the following. I will probably add a limit into this pull request. So we're happy with the limit and with the general approach. And I will add prefixing as a separate pull request, because I think it feels like it changes the way kubectl logs work at the moment. So this is what bothers me. But yeah, I think it's useful to have prefix with a pod or a name or something.
Okay, I was about to suggest a flag that will allow you to turn on or off the prefixing. We could. I can imagine both approaches being useful in different use cases. There will be use cases where I do want to know that this log, especially for example when I will be following the logs and grabbing it for a specific pattern, then I will want to know on which particular path this log happened. Whereas in some other cases, I might be only interested in a particular log pattern, and I don't care about the source. And as you probably mentioned, in the cases where you are streaming only from a single source, the prefix will be just a garbage that people will not want to see. So we could start probably, and that won't break the backwards compatibility, with the prefix flag being turned off by default. And if you want to see the prefixes, you need to explicitly say attach prefixes or whatever the flag name you're going to come up with. And I think that doing this in a follow-up PR does make sense.
Great, cool. Yeah. I have a quick question, not directly related to this one. I think it's my first meeting with you guys, and I'm not sure about the process. Do you want me to document it somewhere in the pull request, or should I create a new Kubernetes enhancement proposal, or how do you call it? I don't remember.
So no, this is improving the current commands. It's not as big feature that would require an enhancement proposal for this.
Okay, great. But I will probably add some notes from this meeting to the pull request, so you can just review it afterwards and say, okay, we are happy with the limit, with everything, with flag and so on. Okay.
You might want to check the official Kubernetes docs, especially the section that is covering kubectl logs. If I don't remember everything about the docs that we have, but if you will be expanding the functionality of logs, what you could do is update the docs accordingly to your changes that you are introducing, so that the people that are looking at the docs, it is clear for them how this piece of command is functioning. Make sure to also update the examples that are usually at the top of every command. There is a section with examples. Some commands have more examples, others a little bit less. In your particular case, I think it will be worth updating the examples, how to follow the logs from multiple containers with the prefix attached. So it's definitely good to have those over there, and then also look into the official docs and update them accordingly.
Okay, great. I will do it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions with regards to the kubectl logs command improvements?
Thanks for the PR.
Thank you very much. Antoine, you ready for the kubectl diff demo?
Yeah, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Feel free to share your screen.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I can't share because you're sharing right now.
Okay, let me stop sharing right away. Okay, give it a try.
Okay,
Perfect.
cool. Okay, so let's say I want to create a new deployment. So I have created this deployment. It's an example. It's actually the example I found on the website. Before I want to apply that, and I don't know what's going to happen if I apply that, I'm going to run diff and see what would happen if I create it. So what we can see here that is useful is that we can see all the defaulting that is happening, and we can see the object exactly as it's going to be created when we apply. So we can see the defaulting everywhere, like the loading updates, all of it. So now I'm like happy with that, so I can apply. And if I do a diff again, obviously as expected, nothing is there now. We don't have a difference. Now I'm updating my deployment. And for that purpose, I've created updated deployment.yaml. What I've done is that I changed the port name, I've changed the version of the Nginx image, and I've changed from the strategy rolling out to rolling update to create. And so I can do a diff again. And now I see exactly what has changed in my object.
It's got the last applied configuration.
Yeah, it's not included though. It's not part of the difference.
Okay.
We can see it, but it's not changed.
Okay.
And we can see I've updated the replicas, everything. This might not be the most interesting example, unfortunately, because nothing has been redefaulted. And this is exactly what I changed, but at least we see what is going to happen on the server when I do apply, which I'm doing now. And if I do a diff again, obviously it's going to be empty again. That's it.
Okay, thanks for the demo. Can you share a little bit how far you are with the with the progress of the kubectl diff currently?
In my opinion, it's 95% done. I want to improve some of the documentation. Where we see in the documentation people saying you should run kubectl apply, I want to replace by first you should run kubectl diff to see what's going to happen, and then run kubectl apply. But that's about it. Everything else is ready, in my opinion.
So can you mention something about which servers it works against and what happens when?
That's a good point. So you need dry run to be enabled on the API server. In 1.12, it's alpha, which means it's not enabled by default. But in 1.13, dry run is going to be beta and enabled by default, which means that, you'll need to run kubectl 1.13 against a 1.13 cluster in order for it to work.
So any questions?
Sorry, I think I missed the part. What will happen if you run it against 1.12?
Nothing, since it doesn't have support for dry run, it's going to fail.
Okay, so you're going to get an information that I don't know, the server version is lower than required.
That's I could improve the warning, but right now it's probably going to say something like the type doesn't support dry run. The error we have right now is per type, and it doesn't mention the server version, which I could improve the warning or the error. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that in some places, and I think the kubectl run is the worst example of all because it's super packed with tons of stuff and conditions. Some that I probably am guilty of myself introducing, but we are silently falling back to the previous behavior depending on the server versions, or rather about the availability of certain features.
Yeah.
Particularly with kubectl run, depending on whether you have newer API versions of, for example, deployment, we will allow creating either a apps v1 deployments or fall back silently to, well, not silently, because we are going to say that this is not supported and we are going to create a apps v1 beta 1 or v1 beta 2 deployment, for example. So I think that's something that's worth mentioning, that the server does not support server-side dry run. Please ensure that you are running against 113 or higher cluster.
Yeah. Right. I'll improve the warning.
Cool. Thanks very much.
It's definitely right now it says, if you're trying to do it like on a deployment, it's going to say deployment doesn't support dry run, which is not very helpful.
Right.
Cool, thanks. That's useful.
Cool, thanks. That's awesome work with the server side apply, basically, because that's where it all started.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions to Antoine? Okay, that leaves us with enough room for another topic that was brought during restructuring the kubectl. Sean brought a good question, which is, each command currently lives in its own subdirectory under kubectl command. So for example, delete has a subdirectory, create and all its flavors live in other subdirectory. Same applies for attach, exec, and so forth. The question was, whether we want to allow intercommands dependencies. And here is an example that is appearing several times. Delete command exposes functionality for deleting resources, which is being consumed by several other commands. So other commands can have the delete functionality by injecting the delete flags and then actually running the delete command. Other examples include attach options. I think that exec reuses parts of attach command in its own code. So the question is, do we want to allow such interdependencies, or we want to ensure that every single command is being used only within its own directory? And cases such as delete, attach, and I think a couple others deserve a util package. We have the CLI runtime library, and we could promote some of the functionalities that I'm talking about into the CLI runtime. But the bar for getting into the CLI runtime library is very high, because whatever we want to promote into the CLI runtime library has to be useful for not only for kubectl commands, but also for plugin authors and basically people who are using CLI runtime as a library for writing their own kubectl-like CLIs. So how others feel about it? What do we want to go one by one and identify them and talk through all of them during one of our meetings and decide whether it is okay and promote that particular functionality over to the CLI runtime? Or the current approach of having the intercommand dependencies is okay for now, but we want to tackle that at a later point in time.
So I personally think it is worth having a discussion where we sort of step back and analyze what are some of these pieces that should exist within the generic CLI options in the CLI runtime repo. Mainly because if we come to the conclusion that these pieces basically would add to the existing functionality of that repo and would benefit others, then basically why not add those benefits to the rest of the community? And at the same time, I'm pretty sure we'll have other intercommand dependencies that will come to the conclusion that do not belong in the CLI runtime package, mostly because they're kube specific or they address a very specific problem. So for those, I feel like they're okay to leave as they are. They're okay to leave as intercommand dependencies. But I do think it's worth identifying the ones that should belong or would benefit from belonging in the higher level CLI runtime repo.
And there's a case in between the two that you just identified of just leaving and moving it up to CLI runtime. We can also pull out common code and put it into the package kubectl util.
Yes.
So I want to actually mention a fourth possibility, which is to create a package kubectl internal directory, which would define what is common to the to kubectl, but cannot be exported outside of kubectl. And we could put that internal directory at a different level. We could even put one at package kubectl command, and then anything under that directory would be usable in command, but would not be usable out above command. Yeah, I think as Maciej reorganized this last weekend, it looks so much better. I'm not worried about the inter-command dependencies right now, but I think that it might be cleaner if we pulled common functionality into util or internal, and then further look to see if it should be promoted outside of the repo to CLI runtime later. That would be my vote.
I think I'm not sure that I want to care about internal repo. If somebody will decide to vendor in kubectl at some point in time, I don't want to stomp anyone from using any parts of the kubectl, which is basically what internal would do. I think that having just utils where we keep everything that is being shared amongst all of the commands is sufficient, and I do agree that extracting those common functionalities into the utils and then maybe figuring out whether some of them deserve their place in the CLI runtime is definitely worth it. I think I left you, Sean, a comment about that. Just not creating the internal in one of your PRs because I've noticed that you did. So the utils package is sufficient in my opinion.
Okay.
For a little bit, it will be a grab bag for pretty much everything that we are not 100% sure where it should live. But as soon as we split to a separate repo, I think we might want to go back and revisit the utils package contents, because I'm pretty sure that at some point in time, there will be some pieces of code that we could easily just remove because they are not being used or not necessary anymore, or they just causing us some headaches or unnecessary backwards incompatibilities that we'll have to struggle. But yeah, the common utils is I think a reasonable approach. I'm not saying that we will be able to do it right away, but it is a good step towards the end goal, which is promoting them to the CLI runtime. I think I'm currently thinking about the delete and exec, since these two popped up during the reshuffling that I was doing most frequently. I think that there's more than 3 or 4 usages of each across the commands. And additionally, knowing what we do in OpenShift CLI client, I know that we embed the delete and exec functionality in a few commands at least as well. So if people can show me proofs that the community can benefit from CLI runtime having these two, or maybe more than just these two, I think it's worthy considering those two to be promoted to the CLI runtime. But like I said, the bar will be pretty high for the promotion process. Are there any other opinions about the topic? Okay, I'm hearing none. So let's head over to the final step of our agenda, which is stand-ups. I'm going to start with myself. Like I mentioned, I am currently working on restructuring the kubectl subdirectories. Currently, the biggest work that I'm doing is cleaning kubectl command package so that it contains only the commands. I think I have just one left, which is templates. It should be pretty straightforward. I'm hoping to put a PR later today, removing that one out. And then there's also package kubectl, which has quite a bunch of Go files that are connected with specific commands. And I think that might be the next step that I will be tackling, to move them over to the specific commands, the subdirectories. But I think that other step will be a little bit more, a little bit longer, because it will require some more thoughts put into those moves. That's it. Does anyone else have any stand-ups they want to share?
I could share a quick overview of the kubectl independence if you like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so some of you may have already seen, in addition to Maciej's major reorganization, we're also removing the dependencies of the core Kubernetes and in order to be able to move kubectl out into its own repo. And I think that we've merged quite a few PRs, and so we've gotten. There's kind of two different buckets, or at least two large buckets. Number one is the bucket of dependencies on internal versions of resources, which includes like legacy scheme type of dependencies, where kubectl has an internal version of a resource. We've gotten rid of quite a few of those. Another big bucket is the utilities like pod utils, deployment utils, taint utils, that we need to basically copy in as a kind of short-term solution to be able to move out. And those are coming along. I appreciate all of your help with the PRs, especially Maciej and Juan. And then there's a couple of stragglers. Right now, we have about 15 core dependencies, the most thorny of which is kind of the printing, our dependency upon the package printers and package printers internal, which might be a little bit, we're going to have to really work on that one to get that out. But I'm really pretty happy with the progress we've made, and yeah, I guess that's all I'm going to say about that. Is there any questions?
One comment that I have with regards to the utils moves is Juan and I talked about it earlier today, and I was also considering this topic in my head. That maybe during the SIG architecture, we should try discussing the topic of maybe creating a common library for these type of utils that we could share between the controllers and the kubectl. I'm not sure how viable it is. That's why I think it would be worth discussing during the SIG architecture meeting. So
surprisingly, there was a kubectl common repo until about a month ago, and it was created by Brian Grant specifically, I think, for this purpose. But because it wasn't used, because we hadn't got to it. I think that Aaron Krickenberger got rid of it within the last month. So I think that this is something that's already been on their mind and that they would be open to. On the other hand, so one of my worries is that if we block ourselves on this extra bureaucracy, it might significantly slow us down, because I think that we're only a few weeks away from getting out, or at least being in a position to copy package kubectl into a staging directory, so that we can actually build kubectl in 2 different places, which is part of the plan. I'll bring up how I was expecting us to move out incrementally, to give us time to move over the tooling and the release and the testing, et cetera. But yeah, that would be my worry about raising this issue to another place, is that I'm hoping that we don't put too many roadblocks in front of us for other groups, that we can keep a lot of the whatever we need to get done within ourselves. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, I wouldn't put it as a roadblock. I would rather say continue with the moves that we are doing, just like you said, not to block ourselves. But at the same time, in parallel, we could start the discussion with a SIG architecture and maybe go the road of creating the common repo. Maybe the SIG architecture decision will be that they don't care about having a common library for these type of tools. And I can understand that one. I was honestly thinking about it myself, and I have at least one example where there should be a disjoint in the functionality of, I think I was sorting pods by creation timestamp. Yeah. That there is a slightly different functionality required by the kubectl and one of the controllers, I can't remember which one currently on top of my head. But so far, both of them are using the same functionality from within the controller's utils. Even if it would want to change, we would have to copy it over and modify the functionality within the kubectl itself. It might be so for majority of common, for other common libraries, let's call it. And maybe the move that we are doing just now is sufficient, and we don't want to go the path of creating that common repo. But I might be mistaken. So I don't want to block, please don't understand like that. What I'm saying is that we could at the same time invest some time, because maybe it is on their heads and we could create this, because the common library might be also of some help for at least some group of people. I'm not saying that all of us, but at least controllers and kubectl, maybe some other people that are playing with the built-in Kubernetes resources might benefit from such a library as well. So it's just a thought, and it can be guided in completely in a parallel to your efforts. So don't worry about that one.
Okay.
Does anyone else want to share some their current progress and stuff that they're working on? Okay, hearing none. I think we're done for today. We're 2 minutes above our usual time. So thank you very much for very fruitful meetings, and see you in 2 weeks. Bye, folks.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.